Skyrim is filled with places that are dangerous. Caves crawling with Falmer, ancient ruins guarded by Draga, and forts occupied by bandits all pose obvious threats to anyone who enters them. But danger isn't always what makes a place problematic. Some locations are broken by politics, others are trapped in endless conflict, plagued by corruption, cursed by ancient history, or home to problems that can never truly be solved. These are the places where the issues run far deeper than the enemies you fight. Even after the Dragonborn leaves, the underlying problems remain. Whether it's exploitation, prejudice, crime, betrayal, or communities held together by little more than hope, these locations reveal a side of Skyrim that isn't defeated with a sword or a spell. Because sometimes the greatest threat isn't what's hiding inside a dungeon, it's the place itself. And these are the most problematic places in all of Skyrim. At first glance, Ivarstead seems like one of the safest places in all of Skyrim. Nestled at the foot of the throat of the world, surrounded by rushing rivers, towering mountains, and dense forests, the village feels far removed from the civil war tearing the province apart. There are no city walls, no political intrigue, no criminal underworld like Riften, and no visible corruption like Markarth. Pilgrims regularly pass through on their journey to High Hrothgar. Locals quietly go about their daily lives, and the entire settlement projects an image of peace. But the longer you stay in Ivarstead, the more cracks begin to appear beneath the peaceful surface. Beneath its tranquil appearance lies one of Skyrim's strangest murder mysteries. A village haunted by superstition, conspiracy, and suspicion. The ghost of Narfi's murdered sister, Rhaeda, lingers nearby. The Dark Brotherhood eventually sends the Dragonborn to assassinate Narfi himself, and several unanswered questions continue to fuel speculation more than a decade after Skyrim's release. Combined with Ivarstead's remarkable isolation, these mysteries create a village that feels quietly unsettling in ways many players never fully appreciate. Unlike other problematic places where the danger is obvious, Ivarstead's problems are hidden beneath everyday life, making them all the more disturbing. Perhaps the most famous mystery surrounding the village is the disappearance and death of Rhaeda. Very early into exploring Ivarstead, players encounter Narfi. At first, he appears to be little more than another tragic NPC. He wanders aimlessly, speaking to himself, constantly asks whether anyone has been able to see his sister. The villagers largely dismiss him because he's unstable. Many assume his grief has simply driven him mad, yet beneath his rambling lies a genuine mystery. Rhaeda really has disappeared, and nobody seems particularly interested in finding out why. Eventually, players discover her body submerged in the river just outside the village. She didn't simply leave, she died, she was murdered. That revelation immediately transforms what initially seemed like a story about grief into something much darker. The circumstances surrounding Rhaeda's death remain remarkably vague. The game never explicitly identifies her killer. There is no final confession, no dramatic confrontation, no quest leading to justice. Instead, players are left with fragments, enough information to raise question, but not enough to answer them. That ambiguity has kept discussions alive within the Skyrim community for years. Some believe her death was accidental, others suspect murder. The evidence supports neither explanation completely, and perhaps that's precisely why the mystery continues to fascinate players. One particularly popular theory suggests that Willem, the owner of the inn, may know considerably more than he admits. After all, he tells stories. He shapes local narrative. He seems remarkably comfortable dismissing unusual events. This is no concrete evidence implicating him, but the fact that players continue suspecting ordinary villagers demonstrate how effectively Bethesda cultivates uncertainty. Everyone becomes a potential suspect, because nobody ever receives complete answers. Narfi himself becomes another source of discomfort. His mental state raises difficult questions about how the village treats its most vulnerable resident. Most locals simply tolerate him, few genuinely help him. His grief becomes background noise, people grow accustomed to his suffering, and that quiet neglect feels surprisingly realistic. Communities sometimes normalize tragedy simply because it persists long enough. Nafi slowly becomes invisible. His pain continues. Life around him carries on. That indifference arguably says as much about Ivarstead as the mystery itself. Then the Dark Brotherhood becomes involved. Long after helping Nafi search for Raider, players may eventually receive a contract ordering his assassination. This twist remains one of Skyrim's most disturbing uses of delayed storytelling. Nafi begins as someone deserving sympathy. Later, the game quietly asks you to kill him. No explanation accompanies the contract. No motive is revealed. Someone simply wants Nafi dead. The obvious question immediately follows: who? The answer never comes. Players have spent years proposing possibilities. Did someone wish to silence him? Was it an act of mercy? Did Nafi unknowingly witness something? Or was the contract completely unrelated to Raider's death? Bethesda deliberately refused to clarify. That silence becomes part of the mystery itself. The contract transforms Nafi from victim into target, without ever explaining why. That unanswered question continues haunting the village long after players leave. The geography of Ivarstead contributes enormously to these mysteries. Unlike larger settlements connected to major roads, Ivarstead feels genuinely isolated. Mountains surround it, the river limits movement, the throat of the world dominates the horizon. Only a handful of routes connect the village to the wider province. Isolation naturally breeds rumours. Limited information, tight-knit communities. Everyone knows everyone else, which makes Raider's death even stranger. How does someone disappear from such a small settlement without anyone learning the truth? The village almost feels too small for secrets, yet secrets flourish there anyway. Pilgrims passing through create another fascinating contrast. Every day, strangers arrive seeking spiritual enlightenment at High Hrothgar. The village exists along one of Skyrim's most sacred journeys. People pursuing wisdom literally walk through a community unable to solve its own mysteries. The symbolism is striking. Knowledge passes through Ivarstead. Answers never seem to remain. Its proximity to High Hrothgar also creates unusual emotional tension as well. The Greybeards represent clarity, discipline, ancient understanding. Below them sits a village defined by uncertainty. The mountain almost watches silently over problems it never addresses. That juxtaposition feels intentional. Even the 7,000 steps contribute indirectly to Ivarstead's atmosphere. Pilgrims constantly arrive and depart, visitors rarely stay long, and the village functions more as a stopping point rather than a destination. People move through, few truly look beneath the surface. That transient population makes secrets easier to hide. Travelers hear rumours, continue climbing, and life resumes. The deeper mysteries remain with the villagers themselves. Compared to settlements like Riverwood, the contrast becomes surprisingly revealing. Riverwood also sits in relative isolation, yet it feels welcoming, open, community-driven. Ivarstead feels quieter, more reserved. Its residents rarely display the same warmth. Conversations often carry subtle tension. Not overt hostility, but simple caution. As though everyone knows more than they choose to say. The supernatural elements surrounding the village further complicate its identity. Raider's spirit remains trapped after death. Players eventually help her move on by recovering her necklace. That resolution offers emotional closure, but it never resolves the larger mystery. The ghost confirms tragedy occurred, not why it occurred. Even after laying Raider to rest, uncertainty still lingers. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Ivarstead is how ordinary it appears despite everything hidden beneath its surface. There are no spectacular ruins dominating the skyline, no Daedric shrines, no vampire castles. Nothing visually announces the village as dangerous. Players lower their guard. Only gradually do they realise how many unanswered questions surround the settlement. That slow realisation makes the location considerably more memorable than immediate spectacle ever could. The villagers themselves reinforce this atmosphere through subtle behaviour rather than dramatic dialogue. Nobody openly panics, nobody desperately demands justice. Instead, life genuinely continues. The murder becomes another accepted part of the village's history. That acceptance feels almost more disturbing than outrage would, because it suggests unresolved tragedy has simply become normal. There are also broader themes at work within Iverstead that extend beyond individual characters. The village represents how isolation affects communities. Distance doesn't merely separate people physically, it also separates them from scrutiny, from outside investigation, from accountability. What happens in Iverstead largely stays in Iverstead. That dynamic has existed throughout history in countless remote settlements. Bethesda quietly captures it here. Even the natural beauty surrounding the village contributes to its unsettling quality. The waterfalls, the pine forests, mountain air, everything encourages relaxation. The environment promises peace. That makes discovering death and conspiracy feel strangely inappropriate, almost intrusive. Beauty becomes camouflage. Ultimately, Iverstead earns its place among Skyrim's most problematic locations because its central issues resist resolution. Players can help Raiders' spirits. They can choose Nafi's fate. They can complete every available quest. Yet the fundamental questions remain unanswered. Who killed Raider? Why was Nafi marked for death? How much do the villagers truly know? The game never provides certainty. Instead, it leaves players with implication, speculation, and unease. Combined with the village's remarkable isolation, its position beneath Skyrim's holiest mountain, and its quiet refusal to explain itself, Iverstead becomes far more than a simple stopping point on the road to High Hrothgar. It becomes a reminder that some of Skyrim's deepest mysteries are not hidden inside ancient ruins or forgotten tombs. They're hidden inside ordinary villages, where peaceful landscapes conceal unanswered crimes, suspicious silences, and tragedies that everyone has learned to live beside. And perhaps that's what makes Iverstead so problematic. Not that terrible things happened there, but that no one ever truly discovers why. There are plenty of settlements in Skyrim that suffer from obvious problems. Some are crippled by poverty, others are plagued by civil war, crime, or political corruption. Kynes Grove is different. At first glance, it appears to be one of the quieter communities in Eastmarch. It consists of an inn, a working mine, and a small population trying to make a living beneath the shadow of the volcanic slopes surrounding Windhelm. Life there seems simple, honest even. The people work the mines, tend their homes, and go about their daily routines with little fanfare. But that peaceful image masks one of the most unsettling realities of any settlement in Skyrim. Just beyond the village lies an ancient dragon burial mound, one that most of the residents unknowingly built their lives beside. Unlike many dangerous locations in Skyrim that remain abandoned or isolated, Kynes Grove asks ordinary people to live within walking distance of an ancient creature capable of bringing devastation to the entire settlement. When Alduin eventually arrives to resurrect the dragon during the main quest, the village's greatest problem suddenly becomes visible. Yet what's truly disturbing is that the realization that danger is always there, long before the Dragonborn arrived, and long before the dragon returned. The people of Kynes Grove had unknowingly spent years living beside one of the most dangerous places in all of Eastmarch. What makes Kynes Grove so problematic is not simply the dragon attack itself. It's what the attack reveals. Throughout Skyrim, dragon burial mounds are scattered across the landscape. Many sit deep within forests, others rest on isolated mountainsides or forgotten plains. Most are intentionally separated from civilization. Kynes Grove breaks that pattern. Its burial mound sits almost within sight of the settlement. close enough that villagers could unknowingly walk past it during their daily routines, close enough that children might grow up considering it little more than another hill in the landscape. The danger isn't distant, it's woven directly into everyday life. That proximity immediately raises uncomfortable questions. Who chose to establish a settlement here? Did they know what the mound actually was, or had its true purpose been forgotten over the centuries? Given Skyrim's long history, either explanation seems plausible. Ancient knowledge disappears surprisingly often throughout the province. Ruins become landmarks, temples become caves, battlefields become farmland. Perhaps the mound simply became another feature of the landscape, something people stopped questioning generations ago. If that's true, it makes the situation even more unsettling, because it means an entire community unknowingly built its future beside the remains of an ancient dragon. The arrival of Alduin also completely changes how players view the village. Up until that point, Kynes Grove feels relatively ordinary. Then everything changes within moments. Alduin descends from the sky, the burial mound erupts, and the dragon returns to life. Suddenly, a peaceful mining settlement becomes the stage for one of the Dragonborn's earliest confrontations with Skyrim's greatest threat. The sequence is spectacular, but beneath that spectacle lies something much darker. The villagers never stood a chance. If the Dragonborn had arrived even slightly later, Kynes Grove could have become another Helgen. That realization permanently alters the player's perception of the settlement. After witnessing the new dragon emerge, it's impossible to see the burial mound as harmless ever again. The psychological implications for the residents are fascinating to consider as well. Imagine discovering that your home has been built beside the grave of an ancient monster, not metaphorically, literally. Every day spent working, every evening spent resting, every childhood memory tied to that landscape. Suddenly, those memories become tainted by the knowledge that unimaginable destruction was sleeping only a short distance away. Even after the new dragon is defeated, that awareness wouldn't simply disappear. The mound remains, its history remains, and the fear remains as well. For the people of Kynes Grove, ordinary life would never truly feel ordinary again. That lingering anxiety is something that Skyrim never directly explores, but it feels entirely believable. Unlike cities protected by large guard forces or imposing walls, Kynes Grove possesses almost no meaningful defences. Its size becomes another part of its problem. There are no battlements, no standing army, very few trained warriors. Should another dragon emerge nearby, resistance would only be impossible. The settlement depends almost entirely upon outside intervention. That vulnerability defines much of Kynes Grove's identity. Its residents live with risks they have no realistic means of controlling. The mining industry further complicates this picture. Kynes Grove exists because valuable resources exist beneath the surrounding land. People settled there for practical reasons. Opportunity outweighed caution. That mirrors countless real settlements throughout history. Communities often emerge in dangerous places because valuable resources justify the risk. Volcanoes, floodplains, mountain passes. Kynes Grove simply adds dragons to that list. The village survives because the mine matters, not because the location is safe. Its geography creates another subtle problem. Eastmarch already possesses one of Skyrim's harshest environments: steam vents, volcanic soil, ash-covered landscapes. The region constantly reminds players that nature itself can be dangerous. The Dragon Mound almost feels like an extension of that hostility. Rather than existing separately from the environment, it becomes part of it. The land itself seems unwilling to offer lasting security. Even before Alduin appears, the landscape carries a quiet sense of unease. The dragon simply gives that unease a face. Comparisons with Helgen become increasingly unavoidable. Both settlements become defined by dragons. Both are caught completely unprepared. Both represent ordinary communities interrupted by extraordinary events. Yet there is one crucial difference. Helgen's destruction happens almost immediately. Kyne's Grove continues existing afterward. That continuation arguably makes its situation more complicated. The residents must carry on living where everything happened. Every glance towards the burial mound becomes a reminder. Trauma doesn't disappear simply because reconstruction is possible, it lingers. Another fascinating aspect of Kyne's Grove is how normal its residents remain despite their circumstances. Characters continue discussing work, mining, daily concerns. Life moves forward. That resilience feels realistic. Communities often normalize extraordinary circumstances because they have little alternative. People still need food, shelter, income. Even after witnessing unimaginable events, practical concerns return surprisingly quickly. Skyrim quietly captures that reality. The village survives, but survival is not the same as peace. There is also something symbolically powerful about Alduin choosing Kyne's Grove for one of his earliest resurrections. He could have awakened dragons almost anywhere. Instead, he selects a burial mound overlooking an inhabited settlement. Whether intentional or coincidental, the message feels clear. The ancient world is reclaiming the modern one. History refuses to remain buried. Civilization has unknowingly grown upon foundations it barely understands. Kyne's Grove becomes the perfect illustration of that idea. The past literally rises beneath the feet of the present. Even after completing the main quest, players often revisit Kyne's Grove differently. The village itself changes very little. Its buildings remain, its routines continue, yet player knowledge fundamentally alters the atmosphere. The settlement never quite regains its innocence. Every peaceful visit carries memories of Alden circling overhead. That lingering association becomes part of the location itself. Compared to other problematic places throughout Skyrim, Kyne's Grove's issues feel unusually invisible. Markarth's corruption is obvious. Riften's crime openly shapes the city. Morthal's fear permeates everyday life. Kyne's Grove hides its greatest danger beneath the ground. Its problems exist silently, waiting. That hidden quality arguably makes it more unsettling than many openly dangerous settlements. Players can prepare for visible threats. Buried ones are much harder to anticipate. There is also a broader theme present within Kyne's Grove that extends beyond dragons. The village represents humanity's tendency to forget. Generations pass, knowledge fades, warnings disappear. Eventually, people build homes beside things their ancestors may once have feared. That cycle appears repeatedly throughout Skyrim. Ancient tombs become ruins. Sacred sites become abandoned. Powerful relics become forgotten. Kyne's Grove simply demonstrates the consequences of that forgetfulness more dramatically than most locations. Its greatest problem isn't merely proximity to danger, it's the ignorance of that danger. Ultimately, Kyne's Grove earns its place among the most problematic locations in Skyrim because its central issues cannot truly be solved. The Dragonborn defeats the dragon, Alduin is eventually destroyed in the end, yet the settlement remains exactly where it has always been. Built beside ancient history, surrounded by harsh landscape, dependent upon vulnerable industries. Forever associated with one of the most significant moments in Skyrim's main quest. The dragon may be gone, but the implications remain. Its residents live with the knowledge that their peaceful village was never truly peaceful at all. That beneath the quiet routines of mining, farming, and everyday life, unimaginable power had been sleeping only a few hundred meters away, waiting for the day it would awaken. And perhaps that's what makes Kyne's Grove so uniquely problematic. Not that disaster struck, but that disaster had always been there, buried beneath the surface, silently waiting for the right moment to remind everyone just how fragile even the quietest corners of Skyrim can be. Few places in Skyrim and its expansions generate frustration in quite the same way as White Ridge Barrow. On paper, it has everything a memorable dungeon should have. It's an ancient Nordic ruin buried beneath the frozen landscape of Solstheim, steeped in mystery tied to the Dragonborn expansion and filled with dangerous enemies guarding valuable rewards. It sounds like the perfect recipe for an unforgettable adventure. But for many players, White Ridge Barrow becomes unforgettable for entirely different reasons. Rather than leaving with memories of fascinating lore or satisfying exploration, players often remember getting lost, becoming overwhelmed by enemies, wrestling with awkward dungeon layouts, or encountering bugs that interrupt the experience altogether. It is one of those rare locations where nearly every aspect of the dungeon seems designed to test the player's patience just as much as their combat ability. White Ridge Barrow isn't necessarily the hardest dungeon in Skyrim, nor is it the deadliest. Instead, it earns its reputation because so many small frustrations combine into one exhausting experience. Individually, none of these problems would make the ruin particularly infamous. Together, however, they transform White Ridge Barrow into one of the most problematic places in the entire game. The first issue appears before you even step inside. White Ridge Barrow sits in one of the harshest environments on Solstheim. Everything about the surrounding landscape feels hostile. Ash from the Red Mountain drifts through the air. Snow covers the ground. Visibility constantly shifts depending on the weather. Unlike many Nordic ruins that stand prominently against Skyrim's mountains, White Ridge Barrow almost blends into the landscape. The journey itself can already feel disorienting. Players often arrive slightly worn down before the dungeon has even begun. That atmosphere sets the tone remarkably well. The ruin doesn't welcome exploration. It almost seems determined to discourage it. Once inside, the layout immediately begins creating problems. White Ridge Barrow is not particularly enormous by Skyrim's standards, but its internal structure often feels more confusing than its actual size would suggest. Passages twist back on themselves. Rooms connect through unexpected routes. Vertical movement frequently changes your sense of direction. Rather than flowing naturally from one chamber to the next, progression sometimes feels fragmented. Players regularly find themselves stopping to reorient themselves, checking the local map, retracing steps, looking for passages they accidentally overlooked. Confusion gradually replaces momentum. That loss of rhythm becomes surprisingly significant. The best Skyrim dungeons usually encourage forward movement. White Ridge Barrow repeatedly interrupts it. Part of this confusion comes from the dungeon's visual design. Many sections share remarkably similar architecture. Ancient stone corridors, Nordic carvings, frozen chambers, everything begins blending together after extended exploration. Distinct landmarks become surprisingly rare. When environments lack visual variety, navigation naturally becomes more difficult. Players struggle to remember where they have already been, or where they still need to go. The dungeon doesn't intentionally become a maze, it simply begins feeling like one. Enemy placement only amplifies these navigational problems. White Ridge Barrow contains a mixture of opponents capable of creating constant pressure throughout exploration. Rather than spacing encounters evenly, the dungeon often feels as though danger arrives in clusters. You clear one difficult fight, turn a corner, and another immediately begins. Rarely does the ruin provide long periods of calm. That relentless pacing gradually becomes exhausting, especially for characters entering the dungeon at lower levels. One of the biggest contributors to White Ridge Barrow's reputation is the presence of the Reeklings alongside the dungeon's more traditional Nordic threats. Reeklings are already divisive enemies throughout the Dragonborn expansion. They move erratically, attack in groups, frequently use ranged weapons, and rarely behave predictably. Inside White Ridge Barrow, those characteristics become even more frustrating. Confined corridors reduce opportunities to maneuver. Projectiles arrive from awkward angles, close quarters make multiple enemies feel significantly more dangerous. Players often spend more time reacting than planning. Combat becomes chaotic rather than tactical. Then there are the spiders. White Ridge Barrow introduces the infamous spider scrolls through the work of the eccentric wizard Alenia Mothrin and the unique spider crafting laboratory hidden within the ruin. While this mechanic is certainly creative, reaching it requires navigating a dungeon already filled with hostile encounters. Many players appreciate the concept, fewer enjoy the journey required to access it. The laboratory itself feels almost disconnected from the rest of the dungeon, interesting mechanically, but buried behind an exploration experience that has already tested most players' patience. The final encounters continue this trend by asking players to fight increasingly dangerous enemies after an already lengthy expedition. Normally, this kind of escalation feels rewarding. In White Ridge Barrow, however, it often feels draining. The dungeon asks for sustained concentration over a long period of time. Small mistakes accumulate, resources begin to run low, health potions disappear, magicka reserves shrink, fatigue genuinely builds. By the final rooms, many players simply want the dungeon to end. Not because the challenge is impossible, but because the pacing rarely allows them to recover. Bugs unfortunately add another layer to the experience. White Ridge Barrow has developed a reputation among some players for various technical issues, particularly depending on platform and version. Quest objectives occasionally fail to update correctly. Certain interactions can become unreliable, enemy behavior sometimes behaves unpredictably. Navigation problems become worse when technical problems interrupt progression. Not every player experiences these issues. Many complete the dungeon without incident, but the possibility alone contributes to its reputation. Problematic locations rarely earn that label through design alone. Technical inconsistencies often become part of the conversation as well. Compared to other Nordic ruins, White Ridge Barrow occupies an unusual middle ground. It lacks the enormous scale of places like Labyrinthian or Blackreach. It also lacks the straightforward simplicity of smaller barrows scattered throughout Skyrim. Instead, it feels unusually dense. Every section demands attention, every encounter requires effort. There are very few moments where players simply relax and enjoy the scenery. The dungeon constantly asks something from them. Sometimes that's exciting, sometimes it becomes exhausting. Comparisons with Valok's tomb are particularly revealing. Both appear within the Dragonborn expansion and feature impressive Nordic architecture. Yet Valok's tomb generally receives praise for its stronger narrative focus and clearer progression. White Ridge Barrow instead becomes remembered for mechanical frustrations. The difference illustrates how important dungeon flow really is. Beautiful environments alone cannot sustain an enjoyable experience. The player needs direction, momentum, breathing room. White Ridge Barrow occasionally struggles to provide all three. Even the reward structure creates mixed feelings. The spider scroll crafting system is genuinely unique within Skyrim. Few locations introduce entirely new mechanics. That originality deserves recognition. Yet many players finish the dungeon without ever making extensive use of spider scrolls afterward. The reward therefore becomes highly situational. For some builds it's fascinating, for others largely irrelevant. When the journey feels frustrating, situational rewards naturally become more disappointing. Another subtle issue lies in player expectation. White Ridge Barrow looks like a conventional Nordic ruin. Players enter expecting familiar gameplay. Instead, they encounter a location blending Nordic tomb exploration with Dragonborn exclusive mechanics, recurring encounters, unusual laboratory systems, and unpredictable pacing. The dungeon constantly shifts identity. That unpredictability can certainly be interesting, but it also contributes to the feeling that White Ridge Barrow never quite settles into a comfortable rhythm. It always feels slightly at odds with itself. Ultimately, White Ridge Barrow earns its place among the most problematic locations in Skyrim, not because it completely fails, but because it comes remarkably close to greatness, while repeatedly allowing small frustrations to interrupt the experience. confusing navigation, relentless combat encounters, erratic enemies, occasional technical issues, and uneven pacing. Each problem seems manageable on its own. Together they accumulate into something much larger. A dungeon where exploration often feels more tiring than exciting, where victory sometimes brings relief more than satisfaction, and where players leave remembering not simply what they discovered beneath the frozen landscape of Solstheim, but how much effort it took just to reach the end. White Ridge Barrow remains an ambitious location filled with creative ideas, but it is also a reminder that even the most fascinating dungeons can become problematic when too many challenges begin competing for the player's attention at once. Every city in Skyrim wears a mask. Solitude, the seat of politics, hides its rot beneath marble. Markarth pretends its ruins aren't still ticking with old war machines. Windhelm clutches its past so tightly it can't see its present crumbling. But Riften? Riften doesn't wear a mask, it wears a smirk. It's the city that knows it's broken, that flaunts it, that whispers behind every corner that law and loyalty are just words, and gold is the only truth worth following. I wouldn't say that Riften is the most dangerous city in Skyrim. It's not the largest or the oldest or even the most important, but it is undeniably the most problematic, and maybe that's why it feels so real. Riften sits tucked in the southeastern corner of Skyrim, nestled between crumbling mountains and thick, swampy forests. It should be beautiful, and it once was. The docks sparkle in the morning mist, golden leaves fall softly in the courtyard, and for a brief moment, it feels like the city could be the autumn jewel of the province. But take 5 steps past the gate and the illusion cracks. You're greeted by a shakedown, a guard demanding a bribe, an old man shouting about the Blackbriar family, an alchemist muttering about betrayals. Even the beggars here seem less sad and more suspicious. Riften isn't hiding its flaws, it's basically advertising them. Ask any local who really runs Riften, and you'll get the same name, Maven Blackbriar. She's not Jarl, she doesn't wear armour, but she controls everything. The meadery, the guards, the courts, even the Thieves' Guild bows to their name. Maven is Skyrim's closest thing to a mob boss, a woman whose power is unspoken, unquestioned, and utterly unearned through democratic means. You'll hear her name dropped in Solitude, whispered in Whiterun, threatened in Windhelm. She doesn't need to shout. Everyone else does it for her. And that, in many ways, is the core of Riften's problem. It's a city where power exists without responsibility, where Maven's word is law, and law is just a formality. Riften is also home to the Thieves' Guild, a faction that on paper should represent cleverness, stealth, and rebellion. But in practice, they're tired. The guild is a shadow of what it once was. Leadership squabbles, betrayals abound. Their safe house is literally falling apart. Ratway walls cracked, members demoralised, influence fading. The once great syndicate of information smuggling and intrigue has become a gang of petty extortionists. They're still dangerous, they're still sharp, but they've become exactly what they claimed not to be, thugs with better branding. Even as you rise through their ranks, rebuilding their name, you never quite erase the feeling that they've lost something vital, some principle or pride they used to stand for. Beneath the streets of Riften lies the Ratway, a literal metaphor for what the city has become. Cramped tunnels, broken bridges, bandits, druggies, and a secret society of thieves who sleep on mouldy cots next to murderers. It's a brilliant piece of environmental storytelling. Riften is rotting from the bottom up, literally. You don't find hope down there. You don't find reformers. All you find are cynics and some survivors. And as you navigate those tunnels, taking side quests, hunting down traitors, dodging skeevers, you start to realise that the Ratway isn't just a location. It's a philosophy. Down here, nothing is sacred. Technically, Riften is ruled by Jarl Layla Lawgiver. She's well-meaning. She talks of justice, stability, and the people's will. But none of it even matters, because Maven Blackbriar stands behind her throne and the guards wear Maven's gold. Layla's son is wrapped up in forsworn conspiracies, her court mage is under suspicion, and her hold, the Rift, is slipping into chaos at the edges. You can complete the Civil War questline, you can install a new Jarl, you can overthrow Ulfric or the Empire. And Riften? Well, it barely changes. Because the problem here isn't political, it's systematic. The rot isn't in the title, it's in the walls. You'd think a city this cynical wouldn't have much time for romance. But in actuality, Riften is full of broken relationships. A woman searching for a lost brother, only to find the corpse in the Ratway. An orphanage so abusive that the children cheer when the caretaker dies. Lovers who run a stable but have no coin to get married. Saphir, a carpenter who fears her trade is dying. Romlin, a mead smuggler with no way out. Even the Temple of Mara, dedicated to love and healing, feels hollow, like it's playing at hope in a city that eats it alive. You can help some of these people, fix a few cracks, but most of them, they stay stuck. Because Riften isn't built to let people go, it's built to hold them down. No discussion of Riften is complete without mentioning Honor Hall Orphanage, ran by Greylod the Kind, who is anything but. It's one of Skyrim's most disturbing side locations. Children trapped under verbal abuse, hope deferred, dreams crushed. And when you finally remove her from power, there's no oversight, no inspection, no change in policy. Just a new caretaker and a silent shrug from the guards. Riften sees suffering like background noise. It's just part of the ambience. Skyrim's entire political map is burning. Cities are falling, Jarls change hands, borders bleed. And yet Riften mostly watches. It should be a crucial city, bordering Morrowind, housing a major criminal guild, and riddled with influence. But instead, it's left to fester. No battle ever reaches its walls, no lasting change sweeps its streets. Even when you hand the Rift to the Empire or Stormcloaks, the city remains almost comically unaffected. Because Riften isn't a city caught between factions. It's a city that's already been conquered. Still, there's something about Riften. The canals shimmer in the summer light. Leaves scatter along the walkways. The city glows gold before the storm. And once in a while you'll find a moment. Just a moment where it feels like it could be something more. A merchant smiling as he fixes his stall. A guard pausing to help a child. A note passed beneath a temple door. These aren't quests, not mechanics, but fragments. Little reminders that even the most problematic places can still carry beauty. Not because they hide their darkness, but because they survive it. But here's the real trick Riften plays. It reflects you. Are you a thief? It welcomes you. A vigilante? It resists you. A hero? It mocks you. No matter how you approach it, Riften bends, but never breaks. And that's what makes it so compelling. Other cities in Skyrim reward you for action, but Riften just asks, why bother? Because here, justice won't remember you, charity won't matter, and redemption, well, it costs more than most can pay. Canals run beneath every street, docks line its south edge, fish swim through the green-tinted shallows. You'd think all this water would make the place feel alive, like Windhelm's icy harbour, or Solitude's crashing cliffs. But in Riften, the water doesn't purify, it collects. It swirls through sewers, leaks through floorboards, pools under the Ratway like a disease that's sunk too deep to drain. It's not just an aesthetic choice, it's a metaphor for the entire city. Riften is problematic, corrupt, complacent, cynical. It punishes kindness, rewards cruelty, smiles at suffering, and yet it endures. That might be the most Skyrim thing about it, because in this world, not every Skyrim city gets saved. Not every villain gets punished. Not every heart gets healed. Some cities just persist, flawed, fractured, and far too real. In Skyrim, factions are not just clubs or organizations. They are entire worlds that players step into. The Companions promise honor. The College of Winterhold offers knowledge. The Dark Brotherhood whispers of murder and fate. But no faction embodies the art of deception, secrecy, and manipulation quite like the Thieves Guild. Hidden in the damp sewers of Riften, the guild is not only a collection of criminals but a shadow empire, controlling smuggling routes, extorting businesses, and bending the will of an entire city. While other factions in Skyrim draw their strength from tradition, honor, or divine power, the Thieves Guild thrives on something more insidious: fear and influence. It is for these reasons, their underhanded methods, their systematic corruption, and their ability to remain hidden in plain sight, that the Thieves Guild earns the title as the most problematic faction in all of Skyrim. Riften itself sets the stage for the Thieves Guild's dominance. The city is the most corrupt in Skyrim, a place where guards look the other way for coin, where the Jarl's court is heavily influenced by Maven Blackbriar, and where ordinary citizens live in constant fear of extortion. Unlike Solitude, which radiates stability, or Whiterun, which acts as a neutral heart of Skyrim, Riften is rotting from the inside. Its marketplace bustles with trade, but behind every stall lies an unspoken truth. The guild controls what happens here. This atmosphere of moral decay makes Riften the perfect home for the Thieves Guild. It's not that the guild simply operates within Riften. It owns it, directly and indirectly. No other faction is so thoroughly tied to the corruption of an entire city. The Thieves Guild thrives on secrecy. Its base of operations is the Ragged Flagon, buried beneath the city in a maze of sewers and canals called the Ratway. To even reach the guild, the Dragonborn must navigate through thieves, cutthroats, and drunks, symbolizing how the path into the guild itself is a descent into the underworld. The Ragged Flagon is more than just a hideout. It's a shadow economy. Smugglers, informants, fencers, and mercenaries gather here, away from the prying eyes of the surface. It is a city beneath a city, where coin changes hands, contracts are made, and lives are ruined without ever touching the daylight. This hidden structure makes the guild different from other factions. The Companions proudly train. The college towers visibly over Winterhold. The Dark Brotherhood hides its base, yes, but even it lacks the sense of an underground society that the guild embodies. The Thieves Guild's environment screams secrecy, deception, and a life lived in the shadows. Perhaps the most devious aspects of the Thieves Guild is not its heists or burglaries, but its quiet grip on the lives of ordinary citizens. Through intimidation and extortion, the guild forces Riften's shopkeepers to pay protection money. At first glance, these may seem like small operations. Lean on a blacksmith, rough up a merchant, smash a few items in someone's stall. But the larger picture reveals a system of fear. Every shopkeeper in Riften knows that the guild can ruin them at any time. Even when Maven Blackbriar isn't directly mentioned, her shadow looms behind every transaction. Unlike the Dark Brotherhood, which kills targets in secret, or the Companions who take contracts for glory, the Thieves Guild thrives on systematic oppression. Their crimes are not spectacular, but mundane. Woven into daily life, that is what makes them so insidious. They turn crime into governance. The most devious part of the Thieves Guild is not its members in the Ratway, but its patron, Maven Blackbriar. Maven is not officially part of the guild, yet she is the beating heart of it. She bankrolls in its operation, shields it from legal consequences, and leverages it for her own personal empire. The guards in Riften answer to her more than to the Jarl. Even the guildmaster, once restored, works under her thumb. This is what sets the Thieves Guild apart from other factions. No matter how far you rise in its ranks, you are never truly in control. The Dark Brotherhood makes you a listener. The college names you Archmage. But the Thieves Guild, you are just Maven's servant. This dynamic makes the faction particularly devious. It is not about personal empowerment, but submission to a crime lord who embodies corruption at its highest level. Maven is the spider at the center of the web, and everyone else, Dragonborn included, dances on her strings. Joining the Thieves Guild is unlike joining other factions. While the companions in college welcome you with rituals and traditions, the Thieves Guild tests you through manipulation and crime. You are asked to bully shopkeepers, sabotage livelihoods, and betray trust before you are even considered. This initiation is telling. The guild doesn't want heroes or seekers of knowledge. It wants people willing to do whatever it takes for coin, no matter the cost to others. By forcing the Dragonborn into petty, moral, dubious acts right from the start, the guild establishes its problematic nature immediately. The deeper the player goes, the more the jobs reflect large-scale manipulation, forging documents, framing innocence, breaking alliances. It is not about violence, but control, about pulling strings and ensuring others dance to your will. One of the guild's most interesting aspects is its narrative arc. When you first encounter them, they are in a decline, their influence waning, their numbers shrinking, their enemies emboldened. The streets of Riften whisper about their weaknesses, and many citizens believe the guild's reign is over. But through the Dragonborn's action, the guild rises again, reclaiming power not just in Riften, but across Skyrim as well. Gold flows back into the coffers, influence spreads, and the guild reasserts itself as a shadow empire. This fall and rise structure highlights the guild's adaptability. Unlike the Dark Brotherhood, which collapses entirely in Skyrim, the Thieves Guild thrives in the endgame, re-establishing itself as a major force. This resilience is part of what makes them devious. No matter how far they fall, they find a way to claw back to power, using lies, deals, and betrayals. While the Thieves Guild operates as a collective, it is ultimately an extension of the Blackbriar family. Maven's control ensures that her descendants and allies benefit from the guild's dominance. In this way, the guild becomes less about thievery and more about dynasty, ensuring that corruption is passed down like a crown. This fusion of organised crime and noble family legacy makes the guild particularly unsettling. It is not just random theft, but institutionalized corruption. It blurs the line between criminal underworld and legitimate power, showing how deeply the shadows can intertwine with Skyrim's political landscape. When compared to Skyrim's other factions, the Thieves Guild stands apart in its problems. The Companions, honourable mercenaries bound by tradition. Their secret is more curse than scheme. The College of Winterhold, scholars and mages seeking knowledge, dangerous but not manipulative at all. The Dark Brotherhood, assassins who kill for contracts, terrifying but straightforward in their purpose. The Thieves Guild, they don't just steal, they dominate. Their crime is systematic, their corruption total, and their power hidden behind noble facades. It is this difference, the blending of crime with politics, and the ability to make corruption invisible, that earns them their title. Skyrim is filled with danger. Dragons circle mountain peaks, Falmer stalk the underground, vampires hide in frozen crypts. But there is one dungeon that feels different, one that does not simply house danger. It is danger. Hidden in the mountains of the Reach, far from the safety of cities, and far from the comfort of main quest lines, lies Valthuma. At first glance, it appears to be just another Nordic ruin. Ancient stone, moss-covered walls, Draga waiting in silence. The kind of place you clear once and forget. But it is not just another tomb. It is a prison, and it's failing. Valthuma is the resting place of Hevnarak, a dragon priest whose name is not spoken with the same reverence or fear as some of the others. But that may be a mistake, because he is not merely powerful, he is patient. Long ago, during the height of the dragon cult, he sought immortality not through loyalty to dragons, but through forbidden alchemical experimentation. His obsession with plague, poison, and unnatural longevity made him feared even among his own kind. The ancient Nords understood something terrifying. Hevnerak was not content with death, so they sealed him away in Valthuma. But they didn't simply entomb him. They built layers of containment, and that is what makes this dungeon different. It is not a resting place, it is a warning. Most Nordic ruins are tombs of reverence, burial chambers for honoured warriors who rise as Draga to defend sacred halls. Valthuma feels wrong from the moment you enter. The architecture is heavy, oppressive. Narrow corridors wind deeper into the earth, as if the structure itself is trying to suffocate whatever lies below. This is not a monument, it is a vault, and like any vault, it has keys. Before you can reach Hevnerak, you must confront and defeat two powerful dragon priest guardians, ancient wardens placed there specifically to prevent resurrection. Their presence reveals something important. The ancient Nords feared what lay beneath more than they feared invasion. They didn't want to honour Hevnerak, they wanted to contain him. That alone elevates this dungeon above most of Skyrim's other dungeons. It was designed with paranoia. What makes Valthuma uniquely dangerous is that the Dragonborn must participate in the very act the ancient Nords sought to prevent. To face Hevnerak, you must complete a ritual. You gather the ceremonial skulls, you unlock inner chambers, you activate the final confrontation. In doing so, you become the final key. This is one of Skyrim's most subtle narrative traps. The dungeon is structured so that the player inadvertently finishes what history tried to stop. The Guardians you defeat were not protecting treasure, they were protecting the world. And once Hevnerak awakens, it becomes clear why. Unlike many dragon priests, Hevnerak specializes in poison and disease. His mask grants immunity to poison and resistance to disease, reflecting his obsession with biological corruption. He is not just a mage, he is a plague bearer. In a world where most enemies rely on brute force, Hevnerak represents something insidious, slow, inevitable decay. Valthuma's location in the Reach is no coincidence. The Reach is already one of Skyrim's most unstable regions. Forsworn rebels wage guerrilla war against Markarth. Dwemer ruins dot the cliffs. Political corruption festers within the city walls. It is a land of old grudges and buried horrors. Placing Valthuma here reinforces its danger. The Reach is symbolic of things buried but never resolved. And beneath it lies a dragon priest who embodies the same theme. Hevnerak's imprisonment mirrors the Reach itself. Ancient violence sealed away, but never truly erased. If this dungeon were to fall unchecked, the Reach would be the first to suffer. And given its fragile state, it might not survive. There are more difficult dungeons in Skyrim mechanically. There are larger ones, more complex ones. But few feel as claustrophobic and tense as Valthuma. The deeper you go, the more deliberate the structure feels. There are no grand open caverns like Blackreach, no sprawling Dwemer machinery, no dramatic waterfalls. Just stone. Stone and silence. The dungeon compresses you as you go. It forces close combat with Draga Deathlords in narrow hallways. It denies open strategy. It corners you. By the time you reach the ritual chamber, you feel trapped, as though you have descended too far to retreat comfortably. That psychological design makes this dungeon dangerous beyond its enemies. It pressures the player. Most dragon priests persuade power through dragon worship. Hevnerak pursued something colder. His mask's properties suggest a fixation on resisting corruption and decay. He wasn't trying to conquer kingdoms, he was trying to conquer his own biology. That makes him uniquely terrifying. Poison and disease are democratic forces. They do not discriminate. They do not respect power. In a medieval world like Skyrim, plague could wipe out holds. The ancient Nords likely understood that Hevnerak's experiments were not simply heretical, they were existential threats. He was not a warlord, he was a scientist without ethics, and that makes him far more dangerous. Valthuma is deceptive in another way. It is accessible relatively early. There are no level gates, no quest prerequisites demanding high progression. An inexperienced Dragonborn can wander into this dungeon and awaken something far beyond their readiness. And because the ritual is structured as a progression puzzle rather than a clear warning, players not realise the scale of what they're unlocking until it's too late. That subtle trap makes it one of the most dangerous dungeons for unsuspecting adventurers. You think you're clearing a ruin, but you're really breaking a seal. After defeating Hevnerak, you claim his mask, a powerful artifact granting poison immunity and disease resistance. On the surface, it's just loot, but symbolically it represents inheritance. You now carry the legacy of the Plague Priest. You wear the face of a man who experimented with death itself. There's something quietly unsettling about that. Skyrim rarely forces players to confront the morality of the artifacts they collect. But Valthuma lingers. You did what the ancient Nords failed to do permanently. You woke him, and then you ended him. But you also proved that his prison was fragile. What if someone less capable had entered? Many Skyrim dungeons are dangerous because of spectacle. Labyrinthian is epic. Faralhost is tragic. Blackreach is overwhelming. Valthuma is different. Its danger lies in implication. It is a prison barely holding. It is a ritual waiting to be completed. It is a dragon priest obsessed with plague, sealed beneath an already unstable hold. And most players stumble upon it accidentally. That combination, accessibility, narrative depth, atmospheric pressure, and moral implication elevates it above Skyrim's other ruins. It feels less like a dungeon and more like a mistake waiting to happen. When you leave Valthuma, the world continues as normal. Markarth still stands, the Reach still rebels, dragons still roam the skies. But something lingers. You know that beneath the mountains, ancient horrors were not simply buried, they were feared. And you know that if history forgets why a prison was built, someone will eventually open it. Valthuma is not the most famous dungeon, it is not the largest, it does not house the final boss of the game, but it embodies Skyrim's most dangerous truth. Not all ruins are meant to be explored, some are meant to remain sealed. And when curiosity overrides caution, the consequences echo far beyond stone walls. Hevnerak is gone, but the lesson remains. In a land of dragons and war, sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that waits quietly beneath your feet. What makes a place problematic in Skyrim isn't always the enemies waiting inside it. More often, it's the problems that can't be solved with a sword. A dragon can be defeated, a bandit camp can be cleared, but fear, corruption, isolation, exploitation, and centuries of buried history are far more difficult to erase. Some locations are built on dangerous foundations. Others are trapped by their geography, haunted by unanswered questions, or caught in cycles that continue long after the Dragonborn has moved on. You may complete the quest, claim the reward, and leave, but the place itself rarely changes in any meaningful way. That's what makes these locations so fascinating. They feel like genuine communities and landmarks with problems that existed before you arrived, and will likely continue after you've gone. They don't revolve around the player. Instead, the player simply passes through lives and spaces already carrying the weight of their own history. And perhaps that's what Skyrim does best. Beneath the dragons and prophecies lies a province filled with flawed places, complicated people, and problems with no perfect solution. Those are the locations that stay with you long after the adventure is over. Skyrim is full of places with clear histories. Ancient ruins, cities, caves. You usually learn who built them, what happened there, and why they matter. But some locations feel different. Some places in Skyrim seem to resist explanation entirely. They leave behind strange details, unanswered questions, and bits of lore that never fully connect no matter how closely you look at them. You explore them, read every journal, search every corner, and still walk away feeling like there's something missing. That's what makes these places so memorable, not just because they're hidden or unsettling, but because Skyrim never gives you a complete answer about them. Instead, the game leaves you with theories, implications, and the feeling that something bigger might be hiding beneath the surface. And honestly, those are often the locations players remember the longest. The Temple of Miraak is one of the most mysterious places in Skyrim, because from the moment you first see it, the location feels like it exists outside the normal logic of the world around it. Most ruins in Skyrim eventually reveal what they are. You learn who built them, why they collapsed, what happened inside them, and how they fit into the larger history of Tamriel. Even the strangest Nordic ruins usually become understandable once you dig through enough journals, Draga crypts, or quest dialogue. The Temple of Miraak never fully does. Even after completing the entire Dragonborn DLC, there's still a lingering feeling that you never truly understood what the place was or what it became over time. That mystery starts before you even enter the temple itself. The surrounding region of Solstheim already feels detached from Skyrim, covered in ash, ancient ruins, and strange influences tied directly to Hermaeus Mora. But the temple stands apart even within that environment, massive, ancient, and partially buried beneath the surface. It dominates the landscape in a way that immediately raises questions. Unlike many Nordic ruins that simply feel abandoned, the Temple of Miraak feels active somehow, not alive exactly, but waiting. And the people surrounding it only deepen that feeling. The first time players encounter the temple, the Skarl villagers and other inhabitants of Solstheim are being mysteriously controlled while constructing strange shrines around the Allmaker stones. They move in repetitive trances, endlessly working without understanding why, drawn towards Miraak's influence as though their minds no longer belong to them. That alone makes the temple feel unnatural before you even step inside, because Miraak's power reaches outward from the temple into the minds of people across the island itself. And nobody fully understands how. That lack of explanation defines the entire location. The deeper you go into the temple, the more the atmosphere shifts away from the ordinary Skyrim dungeon design and into something far stranger. The architecture still resembles Nordic ruins on the surface, stone corridors, ancient carvings, Draga crypts, but there's another layer beneath it constantly pushing through. Tentacles, eyes, black organic growths tied to Hermaeus Mora. The temple feels corrupted in a way unlike almost any other ruin in Skyrim. Not destroyed, but transformed. And that transformation creates one of the biggest mysteries surrounding the location. Where exactly does Miraak end and Hermaeus Mora begin? Because the temple doesn't feel fully Nordic anymore. It feels like something ancient was slowly rewritten by an entirely different force over time. You can still see traces of what the structure originally was, but they're buried beneath layers of influence connected to Apocrypha and forbidden knowledge. That blending of identities makes the temple feel unstable, like it no longer fully belongs to Skyrim at all. And Miraak himself only intensifies that feeling. As the first Dragonborn, Miraak already occupies a strange place in Elder Scrolls lore. He predates nearly everything players associate with dragons and the Dragonborn prophecy, existing as a figure half hidden between myth and history. The temple reflects that same ambiguity perfectly. It's ancient but not fully understood, powerful but strangely incomplete. Even the Draga inside the temple feel different from those in ordinary Nordic tombs. Most Draga crypts in Skyrim are tied to ancient kings, dragon priests, or burial traditions. The Draga within Mirak's temple feel more like servants preserving something unfinished. Their presence doesn't just suggest death, it suggests continued devotion long after normal history should have erased it. And then there are the Black Books. Few things in Skyrim create mystery as effectively as the Black Books connected to Hermaeus Mora. Their existence immediately disrupts the normal boundaries of reality within the game. Reading one doesn't simply reveal information, it physically pulls the player into Apocrypha, a realm that operates entirely outside of normal understanding. The Temple of Mirak becomes one of the central gateways to that experience, and once Apocrypha enters the picture, the mystery surrounding the temple expands dramatically. Because suddenly the location stops feeling like a ruin and starts feeling like a bridge between worlds. That's what makes the temple so unsettling compared to other mysterious places in Skyrim. Most mysteries in the game remain grounded in history or archaeology. The Temple of Mirak moves beyond that into metaphysical territory. It raises questions that don't have concrete answers, because they involve forces far beyond mortal understanding. How much of Mirak's power actually came from being Dragonborn? How much came from Hermaeus Mora? Did Mirak willingly transform the temple over time, or did the corruption happen naturally through Mora's influence? And perhaps most importantly, how long had the temple been waiting for the player before they ever arrived? That last question becomes increasingly disturbing throughout the DLC. The temple constantly feels prepared for your arrival somehow. Mirak knows about you long before you fully understand him. The cultists know your name. The Black Books react to your presence. It creates the impression that events surrounding the temple were unfolding quietly long before the player became aware of them. Like the entire place existed in a dormant state, waiting for another Dragonborn to appear. And that sense of inevitability gives the temple an almost prophetic atmosphere. Everything inside it feels predetermined. Even the structure itself contributes to this mystery constantly. Unlike straightforward ruins with clear layouts and purpose, the Temple of Mirak feels layered in confusing ways. Ancient chambers blend into impossible spaces connected to Apocrypha. Hidden passages reveal buried sections beneath the visible ruins. The further you descend, the less stable the architecture starts to feel conceptually. It's as though the temple physically reflects the corruption of knowledge itself, a place where reality slowly loses coherence the deeper you go. That effect becomes strongest whenever Hermaeus Mora's influence visibly overtakes the environment. The tentacles, black waters, and shifting textures associated with this place don't behave like natural corruption. They feel invasive in a cosmic sense, as though another realm is bleeding directly into the physical world. And the terrifying part is that nobody inside the temple fully controls it anymore. Not the Draga, not the cultists, possibly not even Mirak himself. That uncertainty surrounding control is another reason the temple feels so mysterious. Mirak presents himself as powerful and independent, but throughout the DLC, there are constant hints that he may simply be another prisoner of Hermaeus Mora in the end. The temple reflects that ambiguity perfectly. Is it Mirak's domain or Mora's? The answer never fully becomes clear, and Skyrim intentionally leaves that uncertainty unresolved. Even after defeating Mirak, the temple doesn't suddenly become understandable. If anything, it becomes stranger in retrospect. You leave with more questions than answers about what exactly happened there across thousands of years. The location never fully explains its transformation from Nordic temple to cosmic nightmare. It simply presents the evidence and leaves players to interpret it themselves. That ambiguity is what gives the temple its lasting impact, because mystery in Skyrim works best when the game refuses to over-explain itself, and the Temple of Mirak thrives on incomplete understanding. You can explore every chamber, read every black book, and finish every quest tied to it, yet the place still feels unknowable by the end. Compared to other mysterious locations in Skyrim, which usually hides secrets beneath physical ruins or lost histories. The Temple of Miraak feels mysterious because it challenges the limits of what players can even comprehend within the world. It isn't just ancient, it's altered by something beyond ordinary reality. And that makes every part of it feel uncertain. The architecture, the lore, the magic. Even the timeline itself surrounding Miraak and Hermaeus Mora. Nothing inside the temple ever feels fully grounded. And that's exactly why it remains one of the most fascinating locations in Skyrim, years after release. Because no matter how many times players revisit it, there's always the lingering sense that something about the temple still hasn't been fully uncovered. Something buried beneath the ruins, the black books, and the whispers of Apocrypha. Waiting quietly beneath Solstheim, long before the player arrived and possibly long after they leave. White Ridge Barrow is one of the most mysterious places in Skyrim and Solstheim because it constantly feels like multiple layers of history have collapsed into each other in ways the game never fully explains. At first glance, it appears to be another Nordic ruin buried beneath the ash and snow of the island. The kind of ancient tomb players have explored countless times across Skyrim. But the deeper you move into White Ridge Barrow, the stranger the location becomes. Draga crypts give way to hidden laboratories, Nordal burial halls connect to bizarre magical experiments, and eventually the entire ruin begins feeling less like a tomb and more like something unstable. Like several completely different stories were forced together underground over centuries. And that instability is exactly what makes the place so mysterious. Because unlike many other ruins in Skyrim that eventually reveal a clear purpose, White Ridge Barrow never fully settles into one identity. It's a Nordic crypt, a necromantic hideout, an ash spawn breeding ground, a hidden black book location tied to Hermaeus Mora. And somehow all of those things exist together beneath the same structure. That layering immediately creates questions the game never fully answers. The ruin itself predates almost everything currently happening there. Originally, White Ridge Barrow was simply another Nordic burial site, part of Solstheim's ancient connection to Skyrim's dragon cults and early Nordic civilization. You see the familiar architecture immediately: stone corridors, burial chambers, Draga resting in alcoves, traps built to protect ancient dead. But then strange details start appearing. The ash, the unnatural heat buried beneath the cold environment, the experiments hidden deeper within the ruin, and suddenly the place stops feeling historically stable. That shift becomes especially noticeable once you discover the hidden laboratory of Dukin's former servant and necromancer. Her presence completely changes the tone of the barrow because it introduces an entirely different layer of mystery on top of the Nordic ruins already beneath it. She wasn't simply hiding in White Ridge Barrow, she was actively experimenting there, using the ruin and the volcanic energy beneath Solstheim to create ash spawn. And the ash spawn themselves are one of the most mysterious enemy types in the entire Dragonborn DLC. They don't feel natural, not fully alive, not fully undead. Creatures made from ash, fire, and corrupted magical force, animated through experiments the player never fully understands. White Ridge Barrow becomes the central location where these horrifying creatures begin to make sense, but only partially. Even after reading journals and exploring the laboratory, there's still an incomplete quality to the explanation surrounding them. You understand what Ildari was doing, but not necessarily the full extent of how or why it worked. That incomplete understanding is what makes the location feel so dangerous, because White Ridge Barrow constantly suggests there are forces operating beneath Solstheim that nobody fully comprehends anymore. Not the player, not the necromancers, possibly not even Hermaeus Mora himself. And that uncertainty hangs over the entire ruin. The environmental design reinforces this perfectly. Unlike many Nordic crypts, which maintain a constant atmosphere throughout, White Ridge Barrow constantly changes tone as you descend. The upper sections feel familiar and relatively predictable: Draga, traps, burial halls. But deeper inside, the architecture starts blending with volcanic heat, and strange magical corruption. The air itself feels heavy. Fire erupts from vents beneath the stone floors. Ash coats sections of the ruin that should feel cold and dead. It's as though Solseam itself is bleeding upward into the crypt. And that environmental instability creates a sense that the ruin was never meant to contain everything now buried inside it. The danger surrounding the location only intensifies because of how unpredictable the threats become. Most Skyrim dungeons operate within understandable rules. Falmer caves contain Falmer. Vampire lairs contain vampires. Draga crypts contain only Draga, for the most part. White Ridge Barrow contains everything. Draga attack alongside Ash spawn. Fire traps erupt unexpectedly from volcanic vents. Necromantic experiments linger in hidden chambers beneath ancient Nordic architecture. The location constantly shifts between different forms of danger, making it feel unstable both mechanically and narratively. And then there's the Black Book. The moment the player discovers the hidden twilight hidden within White Ridge Barrow, the ruin transforms completely from dangerous to deeply mysterious. Because suddenly, the location becomes directly tied to Hermaeus Mora and Apocrypha, connecting it to cosmic forces far beyond ordinary Nordic history or necromancy. That changes everything retroactively. The experiments, the ash spawn, the corruption within the ruin, all of it suddenly feels connected to something larger and far more unknowable. And the terrifying part is that the game never fully clarifies how deep that connection actually goes. Was Ildari influenced directly by Hermaeus Mora? Did the Black Book corrupt the ruin over time? Or was White Ridge Barrow already unstable before Mora's influence ever arrived? The game leaves those questions deliberately unresolved. That ambiguity is what gives the ruin its lasting impact. White Ridge Barrow constantly feels like a location where too many dangerous things converged in the same place over centuries. Nordic burial traditions, volcanic energy, necromantic experimentation, Daedric knowledge, all layered together underground until the ruin itself started feeling corrupted by accumulation alone. Compared to other mysterious places in Skyrim, White Ridge Barrow stands out because the danger feels intellectual as much as physical. You aren't just fighting enemies, you're uncovering evidence of people pushing into forces they didn't fully understand. Every hidden chamber and laboratory reinforces the idea that curiosity and ambition slowly transformed the ruin into something much worse than its creators ever intended. Ildari herself embodies this perfectly. She's one of Skyrim's clearest examples of magical obsession escalating into complete moral collapse. Her experiments with ash spawn feel grotesque because they blur the line between creation and corruption. She wasn't simply studying ash creatures, she was manufacturing them, creating life from destruction itself. And White Ridge Barrow becomes the environment where that obsession spiraled completely out of control. Even visually, White Ridge Barrow feels corrupted compared to ordinary Nordic ruins. The volcanic glow beneath sections of the crypt creates an oppressive heat that clashes unnaturally with the cold northern atmosphere of the island. Fire and ash replace the usual icy silence associated with Nordic tombs. The environment feels active in a way ancient ruins normally don't. Like something beneath the surface is shifting, still burning, still unfinished. That unfinished feeling is another huge part of the mystery surrounding the location. White Ridge Barrow doesn't feel like a completed story. It feels like layers of failed ambitions left buried underground over generations. Ancient Nords built the crypt, necromancers invaded it. Hermaeus Mora's influence seeped into it, ash spawn emerged from it. And none of those forces ever fully erased the others. They simply just accumulated. That accumulation makes the ruin feel almost cursed by history itself. Every era leaving behind another dangerous secret beneath the last. And by the time the player finally leaves White Ridge Barrow, there's still a lingering sense that the location never revealed everything hidden inside it. The Black Book remains tied to Apocrypha. The Ash Spawn still exists. The deeper origins of the ruin remain unclear. Even after clearing the dungeon mechanically, the place still feels unresolved conceptually, like there are still unanswered questions buried somewhere beneath the ash and stone. That's what ultimately makes White Ridge Barrow one of the most mysterious and dangerous places in Skyrim. Not just the enemies, not just the hidden experiments, but the feeling that the ruin itself became unstable after centuries of forbidden knowledge, ancient death and unnatural power colliding underground. A place where history, magic and corruption layered over each other until nobody, not even the player, could eventually fully separate where one horror ended and the next began. High Hrothgar is one of the most recognisable locations in Skyrim, but at the same time it's also one of the most concealed. Not hidden in a traditional sense, everyone knows it exists, but hidden through distance, isolation and the sheer effort required to reach it. It sits at the top of the throne of the world, separated from the rest of Skyrim not by walls or secrecy, but by scale. The mountain itself acts as a barrier, making the monastery feel removed from normal life long before you ever arrive there. And that separation is what gives High Hrothgar its hidden quality. It's not a place you casually pass through, you have to commit to reaching it. That journey is a huge part of what makes the location feel concealed. The 7,000 steps aren't just a path, they're a process. As you climb higher, the rest of Skyrim begins to fall away behind you. Settlements disappear in the distance, the environment becomes harsher, and the world starts to feel quieter. There's a gradual sense of disconnection that builds with every step upward. By the time you're halfway there, it already feels like you've left the normal world behind, and the game reinforces that feeling constantly. The weather shifts, the air grows colder, the soundscape changes from movement and activity to wind and silence. Even the encounters along the way contribute to this separation. Frost trolls, wolves, and the occasional dragon don't just serve as enemies. They reinforce the idea that this path is difficult to reach on purpose. High Hrothgar isn't hidden behind a secret entrance or illusionary wall. It's hidden behind endurance. You have to earn access to it. That alone makes it feel different from most locations in Skyrim. Cities are designed to draw you in. Ruins are scattered naturally across the landscape. But High Hrothgar feels deliberately removed, positioned in a way that keeps it detached from everything below. And because of that, arriving there feels less like discovering a building and more like reaching a threshold. The monastery itself amplifies this feeling immediately. The architecture is simple, ancient, and restrained, lacking the grandeur you might expect from a place so important. There are no large banners, no signs of wealth or power, nothing designed to impress outsiders. Instead, everything feels stripped down to purpose. Stone walls, sparse interiors, quiet halls. It doesn't feel like a place built to be seen. It feels like a place built to be left alone. That quietness becomes one of the defining aspects of High Hrothgar. Unlike nearly every other major location in Skyrim, there's very little movement or activity. The Greybeards rarely speak, and when they do, every word feels deliberate. Conversations aren't casual. They're measured, restrained, almost ceremonial. That creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in the game, because silence becomes part of the location itself. And in a game filled with noise, combat, politics, movement, constant interaction, that silence feels unnatural at first. The monastery doesn't encourage exploration in the usual sense. There aren't distractions pulling your attention in different directions. Instead, it forces you to slow down, to focus on the environment and the people within it. That restraint is what makes High Hrothgar feel so concealed. It isn't trying to engage with the outside world. In fact, the Greybeards actively separate themselves from it. They live above Skyrim both physically and symbolically, detached from politics, conflict, and everyday life. Even though they possess immense power through the voice, they choose isolation over influence. And that choice is important. because it means High Hrothgar isn't hidden due to weakness or obscurity. It's hidden through intention. The Greybeards want separation. They literally maintain it. Everything about the location reinforces that philosophy. The climb discourages casual visitors. The environment discourages comfort. The people discourage unnecessary interaction. There's a sense that the monastery exists outside the normal flow of the world, preserved in a state that hasn't changed much over time. And that preservation creates a strange contrast with the rest of Skyrim. Below the mountain, the province is chaotic. Civil war divides the holds, dragons return to the skies, political tensions constantly shift. But High Hrothgar remains still, removed, untouched in a way that almost feels impossible, given everything happening around it. That stillness can feel comforting at first, but the longer you think about it, the stranger it becomes. Because High Hrothgar isn't disconnected due to distance alone, it's also disconnected by design. The Greybeards know what's happening in Skyrim. They understand the significance of events unfolding below them. And yet they remain apart from it all, choosing contemplation over intervention. That decision creates a subtle tension around the location. This is a place filled with knowledge and power, but also restraint to an extreme degree. And that restraint makes the monastery feel even more isolated. Not abandoned, not forgotten, just intentionally unreachable in every sense, except the physical one. Even the lore surrounding High Hrothgar reinforces its hidden nature. It's one of the oldest and most sacred places in Skyrim, deeply tied to the history of the Voice, the Dragonborn, and the worship of Kine. But despite that significance, it remains inaccessible to most people. The Greybeards rarely interact with the outside world, and ordinary citizens speak of them almost like myths rather than active figures. That creates an interesting contradiction. High Hrothgar is famous, but it is also unknowable. People know of it without truly understanding it. And that distinction is what keeps it feeling concealed despite its importance. The monastery also benefits from how the game introduces it. You don't reach it immediately. The story builds toward it gradually, treating the location as something distant and significant long before you ever see it. By the time you finally make the climb after killing your first dragon, the anticipation itself contributes to the feeling that you're entering somewhere separate from the rest of the world. And when you arrive, the game doesn't overwhelm you with spectacle. It pulls you inward instead. The halls are quiet, the rooms are basically sparse, the atmosphere is controlled. Everything about the place feels focused on removal from distraction, from conflict, from ordinary life. That minimalism is what makes it memorable, because in a world as dense and active as Skyrim, High Hrothgar achieves something very few locations do. It creates absence of noise, absence of urgency, absence of connection to the world below. And that absence ultimately becomes its identity. Compared to other hidden places in Skyrim, which are often concealed through physical barriers or obscurity, High Hrothgar feels hidden philosophically. It isn't buried underground or tucked behind secret passages. It's visible from a distance. The mountain literally dominates the landscape. But visibility doesn't equal accessibility, and accessibility doesn't always equal understanding. That's why the location works so well within the theme of hidden places. Because despite being one of the most important sites in the game, it still feels separated from normal experience in a way very few other places do. You don't just find High Hrothgar, you leave the rest of Skyrim behind to reach it. And once you're there, the separation becomes so complete that the world below starts to feel distant, almost unreal compared to the stillness above. That's what makes High Hrothgar feel truly concealed, not because no one knows it exists, but because so few people ever truly reach it, understand it, or belong there. It's hidden not by secrecy, but by isolation, intention, and silence. Some places in Skyrim call attention to themselves. Ruins scream, peaks crackle with dragonfire, shrines gleam with divine light. And then there's Lake Ilinalta. It doesn't scream, it doesn't even speak. It just sits. A stretch of water so vast it breaks the horizon. Quiet, peaceful, beautiful, even trees lean gently at its edge. Birds circle overhead, reflections ripple in the shadows. But under the surface, it remembers. Because Ilinalta isn't just a lake, it's a grave. And the things that sunk here didn't just drown, they were buried on purpose. Which could make this the most mysterious lake in all of Skyrim. There are many ruins across Skyrim. Few are as haunting as Ilinalta's Deep. Near the lake's western edge, what looks like a rocky outcrop reveals itself to be the entrance to a temple half swallowed by water. Inside lies the wreckage of what was once a proud fortress of the College of Whispers, long since overrun. The current occupants, a necromancer, the former teacher who brought ruin not only to his students, but to the very walls of the temple itself. Obsessed with defeating death, he used the temple to conduct horrifying experiments with black soul gems and Azura's star. But the location of Ilinalta's Deep raises more questions than answers. Why did the temple sink? Did the necromancer cause the collapse, or was he simply squatting in the ruins of something darker? Some believe the lake claimed the temple because of the rituals held within it. Others say the waters were drawn to the power of the star, pulled down by the weight of the souls trapped inside. But the truth is simpler and worse. Simply, no one cared, so the lake took it. Across from the ruin, near the northeastern part of the lake, lies a standing stone, the Lady Stone, resting quietly on its own tiny little island. It promises regeneration, healing, and rebirth, but it also sits alone, far from the roads and unguarded. Players rarely visit it more than once. In a game filled with guiding forces, the warrior, the mage, the thief, the lady stands apart, passive, isolated, ignored. But why? Some say it's simply underpowered, a gameplay design decision, which could be true. But in Skyrim, isolation is usually intentional. Perhaps the lady was once worshipped before the temple sank. Perhaps she watches over the drowned, or perhaps she's the reason nothing ever comes back from the bottom of the lake. She doesn't protect, she preserves. Scattered along Lake Ilinalta's banks and shallows are a dozen sunken rowboats. Most are broken in half, some have skeletons slumped inside. One has a journal telling of a husband's ill-fated fishing trip. There was no major naval battles near Lake Ilinalta, no official histories of floods or disasters. And yet, the boats continue to accumulate. One theory, Ilinalta acts as a magical sinkhole, quietly pulling things in. Another suggests that the lake was cursed by the necromancer in Ilinalta's Deep, creating a magical pull that drowns anyone who stays too long. But maybe the scariest answer is there's no curse. People just stopped rowing, and the lake doesn't ask why. Falkreath Hold and Riverwood sit close to Lake Ilinalta. You'd expect there to be fishermen, trade, boats docked on its shores. But there are almost none. No harbours, no fisheries, no daily traffic across the waters. A few NPCs mention the lake in passing, but none really rely on it. And that silence? It's louder than any scream. Even Hod, Riverwood's lumber mill operator, who sits just a stone throw away from Ilinalta, doesn't use it. He looks away from it, as if he knows something you don't. Nestled in the woods near the lake, players have discovered unmarked shrines, often desecrated, sometimes guarded by necromancers or bandits. One such site sits southwest of the Guardian Stone. Just 100 metres from the lake's edge, a necromancer patrols it, bones litter the altar. These shrines aren't connected to quests, they don't offer blessings, there's no lore associated with them in books or dialogue, but they all share a common trait. They're close to the water, which suggests something chilling. Lake Ilinalta doesn't just draw people in, it draws power. And maybe what it gives back isn't whole. In the quest The Black Star, we learn that Malin, once a respected mage, retreated to Ilinalta's Deep to perform his soul experiments. The College of Winterhold never speaks of him. Not even Nalakar, who sends you to investigate, says much about Malin's past. His name has even been stripped from history. But why did he choose Ilinalta? Why not a Dwemer ruin, a barrow, or even a hidden cave? The answer may be practical, proximity, isolation, but the answer may also be ritualistic. The waters of Ilinalta are still, deep, and ancient. And if you were going to bind souls, you'd want the world to forget where you did it, and water covers all sins, and Ilinalta never gives them back. Beneath the lake's surface are chests, weapons, and ruins, placed without any direct narrative reason. You can dive into the shallows and find helmets, coins, and bones. No enemies spawn there except for a few fishes, no quests lead you underwater, and no one talks about what's down there. That's what makes it chilling. Because Skyrim's design is rarely this empty on accident. If something is underwater, it was placed. And if it was placed, it means someone, somewhere, thought it belonged at the bottom. Exactly like the treasure map that leads you to the bottom of the lake where you find a chest. The lake didn't just drown bodies, it hid memories as well. Lake Ilinalta also plays a role in mods and cut content tied to Oblivion Gates and Daedric incursions. Players have speculated that it was once meant to be a gateway site, a place where Daedric magic pulled after the Oblivion Crisis. Though the game never confirms this, the repetition of necromantic activity, the sunken shrines, and the haunted silence all point to a history that's been intentionally removed. Skyrim doesn't rewrite history, it just drowns it. There are no bard songs about Lake Ilinalta, no tales in taverns, no epic poems of the sunken ship or heroic saves. Other places in Skyrim, like Riften's Canals or Solitude's Sea, have stories. Ilinalta has nothing, just a blank spot on the map. And maybe that's what makes it more terrifying than any haunted ruin. Because it's not forgotten, it's just ignored. And the people of Skyrim have learned not to speak of what sinks there. Skyrim is a land of stone and blood, of ruin and fire, but Lake Ilinalta is different. It doesn't shout, it doesn't whisper, it waits. It lets you forget what you saw. It lets you think it was a pretty view. It lets you move on. But it never really does. Because the things buried here, they weren't really meant to be found. And they weren't meant to stay dead either. They were meant to sink, to stay silent. Just like the lake that holds them, making this the most mysterious lake in all of Skyrim. Everyone in Skyrim knows about the many ancient ruins that can be found on the map. They sit atop mountains half buried in snow. They cling to cliff edges, hiding behind waterfalls. They wait in silence long after people who built them are dust. Some of these ruins are tied to quests. Some offer rewards. Some reveal clear history. But then there are others. Places that exist without some kind of clear explanation. That kind of whisper rather than speak. That reward your curiosity not with treasures, but with questions. These are the places that leave you unsettled. That feel like they shouldn't have been uncovered, or like they're still waiting for something. And some are more mysterious than others. From the outside, Kagranzel seems like a small Dwemer ruin in a big building. But inside it becomes something else entirely. At first, it's quiet. A single room. In the center, a glowing orb floats above a pedestal. You're told absolutely nothing. There are no enemies, no journals, just the sound of gears and the hum of Dwemer magic. However, surrounding the orb are 3 dead bandits who have clearly had a tough time with it. But if you activate the orb, it pulses. Then the lights go dark, and the floor vanishes beneath you. Suddenly you're falling hundreds of feet into a massive hidden cavern deep below the mountains. An underground lake stretches out before you, and on the far banks, Falmer wait. It's a trap. But why? The Elder Scrolls Online may offer a clue. In this, Kagranzal appears again, and the lore there suggests it was a Dwemer observatory constructed to detect incoming threats through visual and sonic projection. The glowing orb? A possible remnant of that mechanism. A magical bait system designed to lure intruders and send them plummeting into a kill zone. The Falmer didn't build this, but they found it. And now they live there, infesting the caverns like roaches in a collapsed vault. The Dwemer are long gone, but their trap still works. Yungol Barrow isn't a quest destination, unless you're specifically sent for Yungol's helmet. But once you enter, the game does change. Almost immediately, you're followed by blue glowing orbs. They flicker behind pillars, drift beside your character, follow you without explanation. They never attack, they never speak, they're just there. Some players can even miss them entirely. Others say they only appear under specific conditions. The game doesn't really log them, no enemies are tied to them, and even when you reach the end, facing Yungol's skeletal remains, they simply vanish. So what are they? The best clue lies in a book, Yungol and the Sea Ghosts. It describes the son of Yungol perishing on a sea voyage, dragged to the ocean floor by spectral forces. The glowing lights may be the spirit of his crew, or some form of ancient Nord death guardians. Yungol's tomb is protected by something. We just don't know what. However, no priest stands to watch, no dragger hold the gate, only these lights. Even though some say they're sea ghosts, some also say they're memories, and that makes them one of Skyrim's most elegant mysteries. Most dungeons in Skyrim have a door, but the Sightless Pit has a drop, and a massive one for that matter. Once you enter, you fall. There's no way back. You spiral down through dark Falmer tunnels, winding into the earth in a helix of rot and ice. But the name is fitting for what it's worth. It does feel designed to disorient and trap. The architecture becomes more twisted the deeper you go. Stone becomes fungus. Hallways turn into ribcage-like corridors. The final chamber is the Temple of Scrib, a cathedral of green mist and curved monuments that look almost biological. Falmer patrol here like priests, not guards. But there's no named boss, no central artifact, just tension and questions. Now the word Scrib is never explained in-game, nor does it appear elsewhere in the lore. However, some players believe this was once a Falmer place of worship, devoted to the twisted legacy of their underground life. Others suggest the Dwemer built it as a cruel form of containment, a spiritual prison for the enslaved snow elves. There's not many journals, no voice lines at all, just the implication that the Falmer still remember what they lost. And at the bottom of that pit, in the temple no one speaks of, they might still believe in something. That's what makes the Sightless Pit so disturbing. It doesn't trap you with the enemies, it traps you with belief. The Labyrinthian ruin is huge, a sprawling complex of tombs, towers and arcane chambers, hidden in the snowy fields near Morthal. It was once known as Bromjunar, a first-era city that served as an early Nord school of magic, a precursor to the College of Winterhold. In its prime, this was a place of learning, ritual and magical theory. But something went wrong. Very wrong. During the quest, the Staff of Magnus, you're sent here to recover a legendary artifact. Along the way, you encounter ghosts, echoes of students and teachers who came here before. You hear them joke, then fear, then argue, and then die. They came to retrieve the Staff of Magnus as well, but found something far worse. Morokai, a dragon priest of terrifying power, sealed in a magical barrier powered by the students themselves. They chose imprisonment over destruction, and for centuries they succeed. There's little written record about Morokai's past, no grand legend, no inscription, only the prison. That's what makes it so strange. They didn't just fight, they built a containment system strong enough to hold a being that predates written history. But why? Why this ruin? Why this staff? And why a city of mages whose name no one remembers? Labyrinthian doesn't really tell you, but the silence says enough. Some magic wasn't meant to be studied, and some ruins weren't meant to be reopened. Avincenzel is the kind of ruin that doesn't speak through enemies or books. It speaks through ghosts. As soon as you enter, you see the first one, a ghostly Argonian, walking with her old expedition crew. They speak, joke, plan. They're echoes of a doomed mission, visions of the past played out in real time. As you follow them through the ruin, their mood kind of shifts. Excitement turns into fear, trust fractures, and by the time you reach the final chamber, their voices are gone. The story connects to a quest involving the Dwemer lexicon, which from deepest fathoms begs you to return. She speaks in riddles, clearly touched by something the lexicon showed her. This artifact, possibly tied to Hermarchus Mora, seems to hold forbidden knowledge. And the further the expedition carried it, the worse things became. There's no boss, no villain, no treasure beyond the lexicon. But the walls themselves hum with an unseen presence. Was the lexicon cursed? Or did the Dwemer build Avincenzel to house something else? Something no one should ever carry? These places aren't just dungeons, they're questions, unfinished thoughts left by developers who seem to know exactly how much to show, and exactly how much to keep hidden. They give you whispers, ghosts, orbs, rooms that feel older than the 9 divines, lore that spans into the Elder Scrolls Online, because not every mystery needs solving. Sometimes it's more powerful when it's just there. Some places in Skyrim are loud. Their stories spill out the moment you step across the threshold. Bandits yell, necromancers chant, dragons scream from mountaintops and leave scorch trails behind them. And then there are quieter places. Places that aren't hidden but still feel unseen. Places where things don't quite add up. Where the land remembers something that the people may have forgotten. Where history hums under your feet but no one speaks about it. Roekstead is one of those places. You'll find it to the west of Whiterun, past the river and the ridges, nestled in the Golden Plains. It has an inn, a few farms and some familiar names. There are even a couple of quests, if you happen to meet the right people. It looks just like another dot on the map, but stay a little longer, listen a little closer, because the longer you stand in Roekstead, the stranger it starts to feel, and the more you'll wonder what's really going on here. Roekstead appears ordinary at first glance. A cluster of homes, a small inn, a few NPCs tending to crops and livestock. It's the kind of place you might ride past on your way to Markarth, barely noticing it exists at all. And Skyrim doesn't mind if you ignore it. The game offers no formal reason to stop here, only for a quest. No guild sends you here, the town is content to remain on the fringe, both geographically and narratively. But that absence, the narrative silence, is exactly why people have been talking about Roekstead for years. Because despite its unassuming nature, the deeper you dig, the stranger it becomes. The town takes its name from Roek, a former Imperial soldier who says he purchased the land and turned it from barren waste into fertile fields. According to the UESP, Roek fought in the Great War, was injured and healed by his friend. After the war, the two of them settled here. Simple enough, right? Except Roekstead is ancient. It's mentioned in the bard's song Ragnar the Red, a traditional ballad that predates the events of Skyrim by generations. Even more strangely, the town is referenced in 2 much older texts as well, with one of them being the Atlas of Dragons. The former refers to Roeksteading in the first era thousands of years ago, and yet Roek is alive, healthy, and just here. The optimistic view is that this is a coincidence, that Roic is a recycled name, which it could be. But this is Skyrim, where names rarely repeat without reason, and timelines usually hold together with mythic precision. That dissonance between Roic the man and Roickstead, the ancient location, is unsettling. Roickstead isn't just old, it's miraculously productive. Dialogue from various NPCs confirm that the land around Roickstead used to be barren. The holdings of Jarl Geirlund describe it as nothing impressive. Yet somehow, it's the most fertile farmland in all of the Whiterun hold. One NPC even jokes that Roickstead could start exporting its soil. Farming is also rarely mentioned outside of Roickstead, and nowhere else in the game boasts this kind of prosperity. How did a town with no known blessings, no special location, no divine favour, and no apparent irrigation suddenly bloom into the headbasket of the region? Magic, maybe? Alchemy? Or perhaps a pact? When you step into the homes of Roickstead's residents, you'll find some strange things. Soul gems are placed on shelves and tables, which are odd trinkets for simple farmers, right? In Roic's Manor, a copy of the book Spirit of the Daedra sits unguarded. There are no obvious mages living in the town, no alchemists and no temples. So why the magic paraphernalia? There's also an odd conversation with Roic's daughter, in some playthroughs depending on schedules. She speaks to a man who speaks quietly of magic. He warns the girl not to tell the others. It's a moment that can easily be missed, but when paired with the Daedric book, the soul gems, and the uncanny prosperity of the town, it begins to look a lot less like coincidence and more like remnants of something kept hidden. If you've ever played Skyrim even once, you remember Lockyer. He's the thief from Roickstead, introduced in the game's opening cart ride. However, Lockyer dies before the prologue ends. But here's the strange part. No one in Roickstead remembers him, even though he hails from there. No NPCs mention him, there's no house that once belonged to him, not even a passing reference. Even more tantalizing, a cutscene from Bethesda's Creation Kit demo once showed the developers editing a location called Lockyer's Tomb. It was fully modelled, fully fleshed out, but never used. Whether it was scrapped, unfinished, or meant for later DLC, the message is clear. There was meant to be more to this story. There's a theory first floated on Reddit and later picked up by YouTubers like Fizzy, that Roickstead is a Daedric cult in disguise. The theory does fit too well. The soul gems, the Daedra text, the suspiciously fertile land, the secrecy of magic training, the disappearance of Lockyer, the oddly elderly residents who never age. What if the town made a deal with the Daedric Prince of Pestilence and Order, or Mephala, who thrives on secrets and manipulation? The people of Roickstead may have battered their souls, or their memories, and if that's true, it would explain why no one remembers Lockyer, why the town folk live in ignorance, and a deal was made, and the silence was part of the price. Roickstead doesn't shout. It doesn't demand your attention like Solitude's courtyards or Windhelm's gates. It speaks in whispers, through the rustle of the wheat fields, the creak of wooden carts, and the low murmur of farmers tending their land. The inn is calm, the streets are empty, even the people speak as if they're trying not to wake something ancient beneath the soil. There are quests here, if you know where to look. A young man dreams of becoming a hero. A few deliveries pass through the village, but none of it breaks the spell. The tone stays the same, measured, restraint, almost reverent, as though the entire town is holding its breath. What makes Roickstead feel mysterious isn't what happens here, it's what doesn't as well. No one talks about the Dragon Mound just beyond the ridge. No one mentions Haygraven Shrine nearby. No one seems disturbed by the soul gems in their neighbours' homes. They just till the land, eat their meals, and sleep in peace. And that silence, the choice to carry on without question, is louder than any shout from a dragon. Rokstad is not empty. It's quiet. And in Skyrim, quiet can mean danger or a secret waiting to be kept. There's a certain kind of place in Skyrim, a place that was built, populated, maybe even scripted, and then seemingly forgotten. Cut content, internal decisions, lore shifts. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. A place that feels almost finished, but not quite. Rokstad is that place. And that's why people are still talking about it over a decade later. Rokstad is easy to miss. It doesn't call attention to itself. It doesn't throw a dragon in your path. It doesn't offer glory or gold, but it lingers. It sits in the back of your mind like an itch. A question without an answer. A town that should mean nothing and yet means everything. In a game that explains so much, Rokstad stands apart. It keeps its secrets. It buries its truth in old books, strange artifacts, and quiet homes filled with unnatural life. Because sometimes the most mysterious places in Skyrim aren't the ones full of monsters. They're the ones that just sit there, smiling, pretending that they're normal, when everything around them says otherwise. Across the wind-swept plains of the Whiterun Hold, where the tundra stretches endlessly beneath a pale sky, there grows something that should not exist. A tree. But not just any tree. Its bark shimmers faintly with violet light. Its roots twist through stone and ash, and its sap, known as the sleeping tree sap, induces dreams so vivid they blur the line between reality and illusion. The sleeping tree, found at Sleeping Tree Camp, is one of the most mysterious landmarks in Skyrim. No lore explains it fully. No scholar agrees on where it came from. Some say it was a piece of the mythical Tower of Nirn, torn loose during the creation of the world. Others whisper it fell from the stars, a fragment of Hermaeus Mora's realm. Or perhaps the remnant of a giant's dream that took root in the waking world. It is both beautiful and unsettling, alive yet alien, and that is what makes it Skyrim's most mysterious place. The Sleeping Tree Camp lies west of Whiterun, nestled between the plains and the mountains. The camp itself is simple, a few giant tents, a cooking fire, and at its heart, the glowing tree itself. The giants who inhabit the camp seem to worship or protect it. Unlike their kin, it's as if even they understand that this tree is sacred or dangerous. The landscape around the tree seems changed by its presence. The ground is oddly coloured, the grass is sparse, and the air is faintly hazy, as though the world itself is holding its breath. There is no sound of wind here, no bird song, only the faint hum of something ancient, something that doesn't quite belong. The most bizarre and defining feature of the sleeping tree is its sap, a rare substance that can be collected in vials. It glows faintly purple, and when consumed, it grants the drinker immense vitality and strength at a cost. The sleeping tree sap temporarily increases stamina and resistance, but also induces a stale, dreamlike fog. Users report hallucinations, strange visions, and in extreme cases, unconsciousness. Some suggest that the tree feeds on these dreams, that it drinks the consciousness of those who taste its essence. In Skyrim's world, where potions and alchemy are commonplace, the sap stands apart. It doesn't behave like a natural mixture, it feels alive. There are even merchants in Whiterun who seek to trade in the sap, implying that this bizarre substance has become part of Skyrim's underground economy. Half medicine, half narcotic. Its effects blur the line between reality and dream, and the source of that power only deepens the mystery of the tree itself. Scholars and travellers have long debated where the sleeping tree came from. Each theory is stranger than the last. Some claim that the sleeping tree was born of a meteor, a seed carried through the void that crashed into Skyrim long ago. Its otherworldly glow and unnatural resilience seem to support this theory. If true, it would mean the tree is not of Nirn at all. but a relic of another realm, or another world entirely. Others believe it was flung into the air during the eruption of Red Mountain, carried by divine or Daedric forces before landing in Whiterun's tundra. The reddish hue of its roots, reminiscent of volcanic glass, could support this origin. Perhaps the most chilling theory ties it to Hermaeus Mora herself, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge and Fate. The tree's alien appearance and dream-inducing sap mirror the strange, organic structures seen in Mora's realm. If so, the tree could be a tendril from that realm, reaching into Skyrim to observe or corrupt the minds of mortals. None of these explanations are confirmed. They might never be, and that's what makes the sleeping tree so fascinating. It resists understanding. It refuses to fit neatly into Skyrim's known mythology. Perhaps the most peculiar aspect of the sleeping tree is not the tree itself, but its guardian. The giant who lives here does not attack on sight. This is almost unheard of in Skyrim, where giants fiercely protect their mammoths and territory. But if you do get too close, just be wary that you will be sent into the sky like I did. Yet at the sleeping tree they are calm. Some travelers believe these giants are dream-bound, enslaved by the tree's sap. Their somewhat gentle behaviour could be the result of constant exposure to its hallucinogenic power, leaving them in a state of perpetual trance. Others believe they are its chosen protectors, creatures who understand the tree's cosmic importance in a way mortals cannot. Whatever the truth, the relationship between the giant and the tree only adds to the camp's eerie mystique. It is a place of peace, yes, but peace of a strange, unnatural kind. In Whiterun, you may encounter Ysolda, an ambitious trader with dreams of independence. She asks the Dragonborn to collect sleeping tree sap for her, implying that she already has connections to its distribution. Her request opens a window into an unsettling truth. The sap is not just a curiosity, it's a commodity. If she is willing to buy it, that means someone is selling it. Somewhere in Skyrim there exists a quiet trade in the sap, its users chasing the vivid dreams it induces. In a land of hardship, perhaps they see those dreams as an escape. This commercialization of something so alien, so potentially dangerous, is deeply Skyrim in spirit. It reflects the world's indifference to mystery, how wonder and horror alike are reduced to trade goods and coin. The sleeping tree, then, is not just bizarre in its existence, it's bizarre in how casually the world accepts it. The very name sleeping tree implies a state between wakefulness and unconsciousness, a threshold. Some mages speculate that the tree acts as a conduit between Nirn and the dreams of Aetherius. Perhaps those who drink its sap enter not mere hallucinations, but glimpses of another plane of existence. There are whispers of travellers who fell asleep beneath its roots and never woke up again. Others awoke days later, speaking of vast forests of light, endless skies, and the voice of a great tree, whispering in a language no mortal tongue could speak. If true, this makes the sleeping tree not just a plant, but a living portal, one that connects Skyrim's physical world with its spiritual or cosmic dimensions. And if it is dreaming, then perhaps in some strange way, all of Skyrim dreams with it as well. It's ironic that Skyrim's most bizarre phenomenon lies so close to its most familiar city. Whiterun, the heart of trade and politics, stands as a symbol of normalness in Skyrim. Its walls are safe, its people proud, its leadership stable compared to the chaos elsewhere. Yet just beyond these walls, in the plains where mammoths wander, grows a tree that defies all natural law. It's as though the two coexist in deliberate contrast. Whiterun represents the mortal world, stable, rational, and civilized, while the sleeping tree embodies the cosmic and unknowable. Every day, merchants, soldiers, and travelers pass within sight of its faint purple glow, never questioning its presence. It is the bizarre hiding in plain sight. The sleeping tree is one of Skyrim's greatest enigmas. a living contradiction that blurs the line between plant, god, and dream. It stands in quiet defiance of explanation, its roots sunk deep into the bones of the world, its branches reaching towards something beyond mortal comprehension. In a land defined by war and prophecy, it reminds us that not all mysteries can be solved, and not all beauty is meant to be understood. Maybe the tree really does dream, and maybe when we stand beneath it, we dream with it. Whatever its truth, the sleeping tree remains Skyrim's most mysterious and bizarre place, an alien heart beating quietly beneath the open sky, whispering to anyone who dares listen that the world of men is smaller, stranger, and far more magical than they will ever know. In the far northern reaches of Skyrim, nestled between frost-bitten cliffs and blizzards that never rest, lies a place few known, and even fewer survive. The Chill. To most, it's not even a location. They've never heard of it, never seen it on the map, and certainly never dared to stumble into it by chance. It doesn't announce itself, nor does it offer the illusion of justice and fairness. Instead, it whispers a warning in the howling wind. This is where Winterhold sends those they wish forgotten, and within its glacial prison walls lies the skeletal remains of prisoners long dead. Silent, frozen figures who raise more questions than answers. The Chill is unlike any other prison in Skyrim. It is the only hold facility not managed by jailers or city guards, but by conjured frost atronics. Elemental beings of ice who offer no sympathy, no nourishment, and no reprieve. And in the farthest corners of this glacial cave, you find them. Locked cages, bedrolls iced over with time, and the bones of those who never left. But who are they? Why are they left to die? And what does this unassuming location tell us about Winterhold, the college, and the darker undercurrents of Skyrim's justice system? The Chill is not labelled on any map and cannot be found through exploration alone. In fact, the only way most players discover it is through an arrest in the hold of Winterhold, one of the least populated and most isolated regions in Skyrim. When you choose imprisonment over a fine in this hold, instead of waking up in a city cell, you awaken in a cave. The walls are slick with frost, the air is heavy with silence, the cells are small, metallic cages with adept-level locks. 3 of them line the cave's walls. Each cage contains a bedroll, some bones, and all emit a chilling aura of neglect. But unlike other jails in Skyrim, there is no exit mechanism, no waiting guard to release you after time has passed. This is a place where you are meant to escape or die in. But what truly sets the Chill apart is what you find when you look closely at the details. 2 of the cages contain human remains. There are no journals, no named markers, no dialogue triggers to identify them. The game offers no quest or backstory. It gives you only the image of these bones, curled up on bedrolls sealed behind iron bars. The implication is bleak. These were real prisoners, once alive, who died from exposure, starvation, or perhaps even at the hands of the frost trolls themselves. One cannot help but wonder, why are they so forgotten? Were they simply low-level criminals the Jarl wished to dispose of? Were they mages cast out of the College of Winterhold for breaking rules that went too far? Or were they political prisoners? People whose continued existence threatened the fragile order of a crumbling hold? There is one possibility that adds a particularly tragic angle. The college has a dark history. Members involved in necromancy, Daedric worship, and magical incidents have vanished with little explanation. These skeletal remains may be proof of those stories, evidence that the college doesn't exile its most dangerous members to the wilds, but locks them away in the Chill, where their mistakes can be quietly erased. While every other hold in Skyrim uses guards and jailers to maintain order, Winterhold relies on the frost trolls, summoned ice elementals. This is more than a mere aesthetic choice. It's emblematic of how Winterhold views its prisoners, not as citizens who've broken the law, but as expendables. People unworthy of even basic human dignity. These frost atronarchs don't feed, speak, or care. They won't hesitate to kill a prisoner attempting to escape. And their cold, mindless efficiency makes them the perfect tools for silent execution. If a prisoner were to die of starvation or illness, no guard would know. No reports would be filed, no one would ever visit the chill to retrieve their body. This system absolves any human of moral responsibility. It allows the authorities of Winterhold, whether the Jarl or the College, to maintain plausible deniability. The chill operates like a machine, and the Frost Atronachs are its gears. Players have speculated wildly over the years about who the skeletons in the chill may have been. Some theorists suggest that they could be remnants of the Great Collapse, the mysterious cataclysm that destroyed much of Winterhold and left the city in ruins. Perhaps in the chaos, the Jarl's court turned to the cruel punishments to maintain control. Others think the bones could belong to mages who dabbled in Daedric rituals or Black Soul gem magic, criminal acts even in the arcane lenient halls of the college. Reddit and the Elder Scrolls forums have pointed to possible connections with the Sigic Order or the remnants of the Mythic Dawn, hiding in plain sight and eliminated when discovered. Still, others believe the prisoners may not be criminals at all, but scapegoats. People who knew too much about the college's experiments, or who bore witness to things the Jarl's court wanted buried. There's also the uncanny silence about the chill in-game. No NPC mentions it, not even the guards or mages. You only hear about it when you're going to jail. It's almost as if everyone in Winterhold is pretending it doesn't exist. This kind of narrative omission is pretty rare in Skyrim, and often a signal that something darker lurks beneath the surface. The use of magic for containment and execution is a theme deeply ingrained in Skyrim's lore, but in the chill, that theme is taken to its coldest extreme. Unlike the Dwemer ruins, this isn't a mystical place meant to awe, it's meant to erase. Prisoners here aren't just locked away, they're deleted. No one comes looking for them and no one knows their names. It's a brutal metaphor for the unchecked power of Winterhold's institution. The Jarl, weakened and powerless, in a hold lost to time, may be clinging to order by any means. The college, unregulated and secretive, could be using the chill as a dumping ground for their mistakes. And that makes the skeletons more than just a set dressing. They are narrative relics, fossils of a system that no longer sees justice as rehabilitation, but as erasure. Skyrim is full of mysteries, but few are as quietly chilling as the chill. The prison offers no quests, no dialogue, no direct lore, but it tells a story all the same. Through its design, its silence, and the forgotten bones of the prisoners, it paints a picture of a hold struggling to maintain power, a college guarding its secrets, and a justice system that would rather you freeze in silence than be heard in defiance. The skeletons remain not just as relics of failed escapes or neglected prisoners, but as symbols of a broader truth in Skyrim. Sometimes the coldest places aren't just made of ice, they're made of indifference. And in the end, maybe that's the scariest mystery of all. Because even in Skyrim, it's very rare to see something as neglected as this. Some places in Skyrim demand your attention. You see them glowing on the compass, quest markers drag you towards them, dialogue pushes you into their history. And then there are others, the ones that just kind of exist. You pass by them without knowing, maybe a dozen times, or maybe more. They're tucked between riverbanks, cliffs, or collapsed roads, places so natural you think they're just empty. And then one day, you take the wrong path along the White River, southeast of Windhelm, and you hear it, a waterfall. You step behind the edge of it, expecting a cave or maybe just a dead-end pool. But instead, you find a door which leads to the abandoned prison. And after 13 years, I still think about what I found inside. The abandoned prison has no quests tied to it. No event sends you here, no bounty board, and no courier note. In fact, until the Anniversary Edition added a brief fishing creation and alternative start functionality, there was literally nothing pulling the player here. but it's fully modelled, fully voiced, and fully abandoned. Somewhat. Cells, skeletons, a crumbling hallway system, a mess hall, quad quarters, all the things you'd expect from an official prison facility. But no name, no official history, and no memory. It feels like it was just turned off, as if the Empire simply forgot about it, or chose to. As soon as you enter, you noticed what caused the ruin. Water. Torrents of it, pouring through cracked ceilings and corroded stone. The White River flows into the prison, breaking the walls, pooling at your feet, and cutting off some corridors entirely. This was not an attack. It was time. And the prison didn't die in flames, it drowned. Furniture floats, cell doors hang from broken hinges. There are signs of a hasty evacuation, but not a complete one. Because bodies still remain, and they're not all in their cells. Most dungeons in Skyrim follow a clear path. You find enemies, you fight through it, and then you loot. The abandoned prison follows something more subtle and much more disturbing. The guards are still here, skeletons in full Imperial armour, sprawled near collapsed beams, one even hanging off a stairway, with its sword still drawn. Some tried to escape, but some didn't make it. There are signs of conflict but not war, and just desperation. Something happened here, something fast, maybe a collapse, maybe the flood, and the Empire. They didn't clean it up, they left it. Or perhaps they were never allowed back in. In the lower section of the prison, if you look carefully, you'll find two documents. A guard's note describing rising water levels and damaged infrastructure, and a prisoner's journal smuggled out through a crack in the wall, detailing the last days of incarceration. The guard is worried, but focused, and the prisoner is terrified. They describe guards abandoning posts, confusion in the halls, water seeping into the bunks, and then silence. There's no record of an evacuation order, no mention of outside reinforcements, just fear and then stillness. As if the prison sealed itself off, and as if the world moved on without it. Unlike places like the Chill, the abandoned prison doesn't have a defined cultural or political role. Not Dunmer, not Daedric, and not Stormcloak. There's no shrine, no racial banners, no inscriptions. Which raises a question. Who really built this? Some speculate it was a pre-Empire military site, a temporary holding facility. Others think it was Nordic, later co-opted by Imperial forces. The most compelling theory, however, is it was a secret Imperial site, never intended for the public, and used for prisoners the Empire didn't want associated with major cities, political dissidents, war deserters, witch hunts, and once it became unstable, it was sealed and forgotten by design. The level design here is simple, but haunting. You start at the top, collapsed halls, collapsed roof, half-buried furniture. You move down into cells, low chambers, bunk beds, and broken kitchens. And then you end up in the lowest area, where water runs the deepest, facing a room that looks like it was never meant to be escaped from. Iron doors, no windows, no light. And you realise this wasn't just a holding facility, was it? It was a final stop. Some of these prisoners were never meant to be transferred. They were meant to disappear. The abandoned prison sits at a strange fork in the White River, between Mixwater Mill and Valheim Towers. You can walk past the waterfall a dozen times and never notice the door tucked behind the mist. There's no obvious path, no combat outside, and no glowing loot. Just rock, water, and the faint splash of stone. And if you never poke behind the falls, you never find it, which makes it feel more like a secret than a dungeon, and more like a memory than a location. You expect the abandoned prison to be somewhat empty, a ruin, a forgotten pile of flooded stone and rusted bars. And for a moment it is. But then the air kind of changes as you move deeper into the dungeon. A chill creeps in, deeper than the cold of the White River's spray. And as you step deeper into the lower levels, where water laps at your ankles and the torchlight flickers against the mildew-slick walls, You see them. The ghosts of the abandoned prison. Flickering, semi-transparent forms. Their faces long gone, their bodies faded into grey mist. But their rage is very real. These aren't spirits drifting in mourning. They attack, silently, swiftly, with old iron weapons that should have rusted into the dust long ago. They moan in bursts of grief or fury, and when they vanish, they don't fall, they disperse, as if they've finally realised it's too late, that they're no longer alive. This kind of place is a place where lore enthusiasts love to break down. It's a ruin with no direct quest, documents you can miss, skeletons telling half the story, and environmental design that reveals secret in silence. The kind of location where every object matters. A knocked over chair, a cell that was locked but broken open, a table set with untouched food. It's more than storytelling, it's ghostwriting, and Bethesda left the pen right where you can find it, if you're paying attention. 13 years later, after my first playthrough of Skyrim, I still think about that waterfall, how quiet it was, how strange the prison felt inside, complete, deliberate, and utterly unspoken for. You can walk away from it, loot it, use it as a home base, or never return. But something about that space sticks with you. A jail where no one survived, a facility no one remembers. And a story that was buried not by war, but by water, time, and the game's refusal to explain itself. Some places in Skyrim want you to be a hero, but this one kind of just wants you to listen. What makes a place truly mysterious in Skyrim isn't just hidden lore or unanswered questions. It's the feeling that even after you've explored everything, something still doesn't fully make sense. These locations leave gaps on purpose. You find fragments of stories, strange details, ancient powers, and pieces of history that never completely connect together, no matter how close you look. And instead of giving clear answers, Skyrim often leaves players with implications, letting the atmosphere and the unknown do most of the work. That's why these places stay memorable for so long. Because mystery creates curiosity in a way straightforward storytelling can't. The less certain you are about what really happened somewhere, the more your mind keeps returning to it afterward. And Skyrim understands that perfectly. Some of the game's most fascinating locations aren't the ones with the biggest battles or the best rewards. They're the places that leave you unsettled, confused, and still searching for answers long after you've already left them behind.